You're not going to like this message about your person, not because it is cruel, but because it disrupts the story you've been telling yourself to survive. The universe does not always speak to comfort, it speaks to awaken. And what you are being asked to see now is not about them alone. It is about the part of you that attached meaning where there was uncertainty, and hope where there was silence. This person did not enter your life by accident. Encounters like this emerge when something unresolved within you is ready to be exposed. They mirror unclaimed parts of your psyche, desires you postponed, boundaries you softened, truths you sensed but did not want to confirm. The tension you feel is not love as purity. It is the collision between intuition and denial. What hurts most is not their behavior, but your expectation that they would become conscious of what they stirred in you. Yet awareness cannot be forced. Some people awaken growth in others without ever participating in it themselves. They act as catalysts, not companions. And the pain comes from mistaking the catalyst for the destination. The universe is blunt when repetition fails. If confusion has been constant, it is not a test of patience, it is information. When affection is inconsistent, it is not mystery, it is misalignment. Your psyche has been sending signals long before your mind was willing to listen. You felt it in the pauses, the hesitation, the emotional distance that required you to interpret instead of receive. This message is not asking you to judge them. It is asking you to stop abandoning yourself to keep the connection alive. Growth begins when projection ends. When you withdraw the fantasy and face the reality, something sobering but liberating occurs. Your energy returns to you. You no longer wait to be chosen, you choose clarity. The universe knew someone needed to hear this because cycles repeat until consciousness arrives. This person was not meant to stay, but to show you where you still negotiate your worth. Once the lesson is integrated, the attachment loosens naturally, not through force, but through understanding. And that is how you reclaim your power, not by holding on, but by seeing clearly. This connection did not arrive to fill a missing piece or to deliver the sense of completion you were seeking. It emerged at a moment when certain inner patterns were ready to surface, patterns that had quietly shaped your choices long before this person appeared. Often, we believe we are drawn to someone because they possess something we lack, but more accurately, we are drawn to those who activate what remains unconscious within us. Their presence stirs emotions, expectations, and reactions that feel disproportionate, and this intensity is the first signal that something deeper is unfolding beneath the surface. Unresolved inner patterns tend to form early, shaped by experiences where needs were unmet or feelings were left unexpressed. They remain dormant until a relationship mirrors them with precision. When this person entered your life, they did not create longing or insecurity. They illuminated what already existed. The desire to be seen, chosen, or emotionally secure did not originate with them. It was awakened by the familiar dynamic they unknowingly embodied. What feels like fate is often recognition at the level of the psyche. The mind resists this understanding because it is far more comforting to believe that another person holds the key to wholeness. Completion promises relief from inner tension, while self-examination demands responsibility. Yet the persistent imbalance you sensed in the connection was not a flaw to overcome, but a reflection to study. Each moment of confusion, hesitation, or emotional withdrawal acted like a mirror, showing how quickly you adapted yourself to preserve closeness even at the cost of your own clarity. When inner patterns remain unresolved, we unconsciously repeat them, hoping this time the outcome will be different. You may have found yourself explaining away behaviors, waiting for consistency, or investing more energy than was returned. These responses are not signs of devotion. They are survival strategies learned long ago. The connection did not fail because you were insufficient. It fulfilled its function by revealing how deeply these strategies still operate within you. There is a subtle but powerful difference between connection and completion. Connection engages growth, friction, and awareness. Completion suggests an endpoint, a state where inner work is no longer required. This person could never complete you because nothing external can resolve what must be integrated internally. The intensity you experienced was proportional to the degree of inner material being activated, not to the promise of a shared future. Once this is seen clearly, the narrative shifts. The focus moves away from what they could have been and toward what has been uncovered. The emotional charge begins to soften, not because the experience loses meaning, but because its meaning has been understood. What remains is not loss, but insight. The connection served as an invitation to reclaim parts of yourself. that had been waiting for recognition, not rescued out confusion, and inconsistency are often misinterpreted as obstacles that must be overcome through patience, effort, or emotional endurance. Many people are taught that if something feels unclear, it simply requires more understanding, more tolerance, or more time. Yet from a psychological perspective, persistent confusion is not a temporary fog, but a message. It is the psyche way of alerting you that something in the dynamic is misaligned with your deeper needs and values. When a connection is healthy and grounded, it may move slowly, but it does not leave you questioning your place within it. Inconsistency creates a constant state of mental scanning, analyzing words, tone, timing, and silence. This heightened vigilance is not excitement, it is the nervous system responding to uncertainty. Your mind attempts to restore equilibrium by searching for meaning, but the body often understands the truth first. Unease, restlessness, and emotional exhaustion arise because the system is forced to adapt to unpredictability. Confusion becomes especially seductive when it is paired with moments of warmth or intimacy. These intermittent rewards strengthen attachment, not because the bond is deep, but because the relief from uncertainty feels profound. Over time, endurance is mistaken for commitment. You may begin to believe that if you can just withstand the ambiguity long enough, clarity will arrive as a reward. In reality, clarity does not emerge from inconsistency, it is postponed by it. Inconsistency is not neutral behavior. It communicates inner conflict, limited availability, or a lack of alignment that cannot be resolved through your effort alone. When signals fluctuate, the psyche tries to compensate by becoming more flexible, more understanding, more self-sacrificing. Gradually, you shift away from your own center, adjusting your expectations downward to maintain connection. This adaptation is subtle, but it carries a cost. Self-trust erodes, and your inner voice becomes quieter. The discomfort you feel is not weakness, it is intelligence. Confusion arises when your intuition and your hope are in conflict. One part of you senses that something is off, while another part clings to potential. Enduring this split creates inner tension, which is often mislabeled as passion or depth. In truth, it is the strain of ignoring information that is already available to you. Signals are meant to be read, not endured. When a pattern repeats, it is no longer a phase, it is structure. The psyche recognizes repetition as meaning. Inconsistency persists. It is revealing the limits of what this connection can offer. Understanding this does not require blame or judgment. It requires honesty. When you stop framing confusion as a test to pass, something shifts. Energy that was spent deciphering mixed signals returns inward. Awareness replaces effort, the need to prove patience dissolves, and with it the compulsion to tolerate what unsettles you. What remains is a clear relationship with yourself, grounded in the recognition that peace does not demand endurance, it emerges from alignment or projection, is one of the most powerful and subtle forces shaping emotional attachment. It occurs when inequalities, unmet needs, or unintegrated desires are unconsciously placed onto another person. What feels like deep attraction often has less to do with who the other person truly is and more to do with what they come to represent within your inner world. You are not attaching to the person as they are, but to the image that has formed in your psyche around them. This image is built from fragments of longing, hope, and imagination. When someone triggers these inner elements, the mind fills in gaps, attributing depth, intention, or emotional capacity that may not be consistently expressed in reality. Silence becomes meaningful. Distance becomes complexity, and ambiguity becomes potential. The fewer concrete facts available, the more room projection has to operate. Attachment grows not through shared experience alone, but through the stories constructed in the absence of clarity. Projection feels compelling because it promises completion without confrontation. It allows you to believe that what you seek exists outside you, waiting to be recognized or reciprocated. In this state, emotional investment increases even when mutuality does not. You may find yourself more connected to what could be than to what is. The attachment intensifies because the psyche is bonded to its own creation, not to a living, responsive exchange. Awareness interrupts this process by returning what was projected back to its source. When you begin to observe your reactions rather than act them out, the spell weakens. You notice how much of the emotional charge originates from expectation rather than interaction. The other person becomes less symbolic and more human. The limitations, inconsistencies, and emotional boundaries come into focus, not as disappointments, but as information. This shift is often uncomfortable because it dismantles fantasy. Awareness requires you to grieve not the person, but the imagined future that sustained the attachment. Yet in this grieving, something vital is reclaimed. The energy that was invested outward returns inward. What you once sought in another, validation, safety, recognition, reveals itself as an internal task rather than an external reward. As awareness deepens, attachment loosens without force. There is no need for dramatic detachment or emotional suppression. The bond fades naturally because it is no longer fed by unconscious material. You are no longer responding to symbols or potential, but to reality. This clarity does not harden the heart. It grounds it. When projection dissolves, connection becomes cleaner. You can see others as they are, without needing them to carry parts of your unfinished inner life. What remains is choice instead of compulsion. Attachment gives way to presence, and presence allows relationships to be entered freely rather than clung to desperately. Awareness in this sense is not loss, it is liberation. Some people enter your life not as long-term companions, but as disruptors of stagnation. Their role is not to build something lasting with you, but to awaken something dormant within you. These encounters often arrive with intensity, timing that feels significant, and an emotional impact that exceeds the duration. The confusion arises when depth of effect is mistaken for permanence of presence. Transformation does not require longevity, it requires activation. When someone awakens growth, they challenge your existing inner structure, they bring unresolved patterns, unmet needs, or suppressed desires to the surface simply by being who they are. Their presence destabilizes what once felt familiar. You may feel more alive, more aware, more emotionally exposed. This heightened state is not always comfortable, but it signals movement where there was once repetition. Growth often begins as disturbance, not harmony. The pain associated with these connections comes from expectation. When someone catalyzes change, the psyche naturally wants to attach meaning to them, believing that such impact must lead to shared evolution. But not everyone who triggers awareness has the capacity or willingness to grow alongside you. Some remain unconscious of the very process they initiate. They move through your life unaware of the depth they stirred, while you are left to integrate the consequences. This imbalance can feel deeply personal, as if something was taken without being returned. In reality, nothing was stolen. What was activated belonged to you all along. The longing, the insight, the emotional expansion, these were latent possibilities waiting for the right stimulus. The other person was the spark, not the source. Growth continues even after their departure because it was never dependent on their presence. There is a quiet wisdom in recognizing this without resentment. When you insist that the catalyst must remain, you resist the lesson itself. The psyche clings, hoping the experience will validate its importance by lasting longer, but meaning is not measured in duration. Some of the most transformative encounters are brief precisely because they are meant to break patterns, not reinforce them. Letting go of someone who awakened growth does not erase what was gained. Integration begins when you stop seeking the feeling through them and start embodying it yourself. The qualities you associated with the connection, aliveness, clarity, depth, become internal reference points rather than external dependencies. This shift restores agency and dignity. Understanding that some people are meant to awaken rather than accompany allows gratitude to replace confusion. The encounter is no longer viewed as unfinished, but as complete in its purpose. Growth does not always arrive through those who stay. Sometimes it arrives through those who leave, ensuring that what was awakened becomes your own to carry forward. That pain intensifies when intuition is ignored, because intuition functions as an early warning system of the psyche. It operates beneath language, offering impressions, sensations, and quiet signals long before the mind constructs explanations. When these signals are dismissed, the psyche does not fall silent. It amplifies them through discomfort, anxiety, and eventually pain. What begins as a subtle feeling of unease grows stronger when it is repeatedly overridden by rationalization or hope. Intuition often speaks in contradictions. You may feel drawn to someone while simultaneously sensing that something is not right. The mind tends to privilege desire over discernment, especially when emotional investment is involved. It searches for reasons to doubt the inner voice, labeling it fear, insecurity, or past conditioning. Yet intuition is not reactive, it is integrative. It draws from experience, emotional memory, and pattern recognition, synthesizing information faster than conscious thought can process. When intuition is ignored, inner conflict emerges. One part of you moves toward what feels compelling, while another pulls back in quiet resistance. This split creates tension that the nervous system experiences as stress. You may feel restless, hypervigilant, or emotionally drained without understanding why. The pain does not originate from the situation itself, but from the effort required to suppress what you already sense to be true. Over time, ignoring intuition erodes self-trust. Each dismissed signal teaches the psyche that its internal guidance is unreliable or unworthy of attention. This disconnection deepens vulnerability to confusion and attachment as external validation begins to replace internal knowing. You may find yourself seeking reassurance, explanations, or closure from others, hoping they will confirm what you are unwilling to acknowledge within yourself. Pain escalates as a corrective force. It is not punishment, but insistence. The psyche increases the volume when it is not being heard. Emotional distress, disappointment, and loss often arise not because intuition was wrong, but because it was sidelined for too long. The longer the delay, the sharper the consequences, as reality eventually aligns with what intuition perceived from the beginning. Listening to intuition does not guarantee comfort, but it reduces suffering. When you act in accordance with inner knowing, even difficult choices carry a sense of coherence. Ignoring it prolongs indecision and magnifies regret. The pain you experience is the cost of resisting alignment, of remaining in situations that contradict your deeper awareness. When intuition is honored, pain transforms into clarity. The nervous system relaxes because internal signals and external actions are aligned. Trust begins to rebuild not in outcomes but in yourself. Pain diminishes not because circumstances immediately improve, but because inner conflict dissolves. What remains is a steadier relationship with your own perception, grounded in the recognition that intuition was never the source of fear, it was the guide away from it. That clarity restores energy because it ends the constant drain created by ambiguity and inner conflict. When situations remain undefined, the mind expends enormous effort trying to interpret, anticipate, and prepare. This ongoing mental activity fragments attention and weakens vitality. You may feel tired without having done anything physically demanding because your energy has been consumed by uncertainty. Once clarity emerges, this mental noise quiets. Decisions no longer require endless calculation, and the body responds with a sense of relief, as if a weight has been lifted. Energy is lost not through effort, but through resistance. When you stay in situations that contradict your deeper knowing, you are forced to hold opposing truths at once. One part of you senses what must be acknowledged, while another insists on maintaining hope or attachment. This internal struggle creates fatigue. Clarity resolves the tension by aligning awareness with reality. Even when the truth is painful, it frees energy that was previously locked in denial or doubt. Self-respect is restored when clarity replaces self-betrayal. Ambiguity often leads to compromise, where boundaries soften and standards are adjusted to sustain connection. Over time, this quiet erosion of self-respect becomes more damaging than the original uncertainty. You begin to question your own worth, not because of what others do, but because of what you allow. Clarity interrupts this process by drawing a firm internal line. It affirms that your needs, limits, and perceptions matter. With clarity, you stop negotiating your value. You no longer require excessive explanations or external validation to justify how you feel. This shift strengthens self-respect because it is rooted in self-recognition rather than approval. When you see a situation as it is, without embellishment or fantasy, you can respond with integrity. Acting in alignment with truth reinforces a sense of dignity that does not depend on outcomes. Personal power returns when you reclaim authorship over your inner life. Confusion often places power outside yourself, making your emotional state dependent on another person, as behavior or decisions. Clarity reverses this dynamic. You recognize what is within your control and release what is not. This distinction is empowering. It allows you to direct energy toward choices that serve your well-being rather than waiting for circumstances to change. Power does not arise from dominance or control, but from coherence. When your thoughts, emotions, and actions align, you move with purpose instead of reaction. Clarity provides this alignment. It simplifies without diminishing, focusing attention on what is real and actionable, From this grounded position, you engage with life more intentionally. As clarity settles, energy stabilizes, self-respect strengthens, and personal power becomes steady rather than forced. You are no longer driven by urgency or fear, but guided by understanding. This state does not eliminate challenge, but it ensures that whatever you face it from a position of inner solidity rather than depletion. What you are experiencing is not failure, loss, or punishment. It is correction. The moment you see clearly, the struggle loosens its grip because it no longer needs to teach you through pain. Awareness completes the lesson that attachment kept unfinished. You were never meant to shrink, wait, or decipher your worth through another uncertainty. This experience arrived to return you to yourself. When you stop asking why it happened and begin understanding what it revealed, the cycle ends. What once felt like rejection becomes redirection. What felt like confusion becomes instruction. And what felt like loss becomes integration. You do not move forward empty-handed, you move forward conscious. The universe does not remove what is aligned with your growth, it removes what requires your self-abandonment to survive. When clarity is chosen, energy returns, self-respect stabilizes, and personal power becomes embodied rather than imagined. This is not the end of a connection. It is the beginning of a deeper relationship with yourself, rooted in truth, wholeness, and the quiet strength that no longer needs to be tested.